Good afternoon, Maine. This is Chuck Ellis, and welcome to the Muddy Waters podcast. The Muddy Waters, if I could get the words out, this happens all the time. The Muddy Waters podcast exists to help the people of Maine better understand what's going on in our state, and to give a platform to candidates and people who are representing us, and for the people to hear from actual reps and people who are running to better understand who they are, what they stand for, what's going on in our political system right now. And so in light of that, today we have with us Senator Jim Libby, who is also one of the gubernatorial candidates on the Republican side. Thanks for joining us, Jim.
Hey, you're welcome, Chuck. It's great to be on.
Yeah, well, it's good to have you on again. I was thinking about the fact that the first time we had you on, I think the question came up as to whether or not you were going to run for governor. And based on, the discussion and the response, I was like, I don't think he's probably going to run. Turns out I was wrong. And so now here you are running for governor. But yeah, it's exciting to have you back and to hear like a little bit about why you're doing that and what you can hope to accomplish and on top of that, there's just a lot of stuff going on. There are a lot of candidates, and one of the other things that before we jump into that's been interesting is somebody who pays attention, is a follower of the podcast and very involved politically down here. Sent me a message, a text the other day that said, "I'm mad at you." And I was like, that's all I read. And I was like, what did I do? And I went and I clicked on the text, and it's like, because I keep having these interviews with gubernatorial candidates and they keep liking them. They're mad because now they don't know who to pick. They keep being like, I'm going to go for that person. And then somebody else comes on the podcast and they're like, oh, they sound really good too. And making the decision, I think, really difficult. So I would say that it's definitely not a bad thing that people like a lot of the people who are running on the Republican side. It's good that we have some candidates to choose from.
I think it's the best thing going because actually we were all up in Aroostook County over this past weekend, and I got some great pictures and even had dinner with one of the candidates. But great pictures, giving them a hug, and we all get along, and we know how important this time before the June primary is for all of us. And we want to show the people of Maine that there is an unbelievably talented group of Republicans who are ready and willing and able to lead Maine. And I'd like to make my case, obviously, today as somebody who has legislative experience, somebody that has been an educator and in business. But there's no doubt about it. We got some pretty good people out there.
Yeah, it's definitely not a bad thing, a bad situation to be in. It's better to have a lot of good choices and not know what to do than to have a lot of bad choices and decide that you've got to pick the one that's going to do the least damage, essentially. Best. Yeah.
I agree with that. And Chuck, where I like to make my case, and I like to start it out with this, is that I have 4 terms of legislative experience in the Senate and 2 in the House. And I've been appointed by 3 different governors for some major positions, including trusteeships with the community college, Maine Labor Relations Board, you name it. So in terms of who could do the least damage, I like to say I can do the most good and obviously the least damage. I mean, I know exactly how the process works. As governor, I would know how to leverage the veto, for example, but I also I have a PhD in public policy. I know how to write policy that's the least damaging and has the least amount of collateral damage. And that's something that we don't do, Chuck. When we have a bill in the legislative process, it does have a fiscal note, but that's the damage supposedly that's going to be caused to government and not to the people that are out there in the marketplace.
Yeah, absolutely. The cost to them, yes, that's how much it costs the government to pay for it. But the taxes that need to be levied in order to pay for that are harming business, harming our economy. It's much more expensive than just the dollar amount that they're spending.
Yeah, right. And so it's, I would tell everybody to take the time to go to jimlibbyforgovernor.com, and then also all of the other candidates as well. And if you like to read, you're going to like my site. A lot of people criticize me for having too much on my website, but I want to be the most transparent candidate. And I have pages and pages of policy positions on economic development, on energy, on taxes, on education, on the environment. And not only have I listed the policies, but I've also offered rationale. And I think people in Maine, they owe it to themselves to go on there and take a look and see if I know what I'm talking about. And I think what you'll find out is that I've got a great combination of experiences, like I said, in business, government, and education. And it's the right experience for this time, especially with the really poor outlook that we have in terms of being one of the highest tax states, being one of the lowest in terms of states that are performing in education, and also being unable to really be much of a player when it comes to bringing in investment from out of state or even developing it within. There's just so many. We're on the edge of oblivion, and I'm going to be in the best position to bring us not only back, but for us to really start to be great innovators, build and grow. That's really what my objective is.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So obviously you've got a background, I think, in both, economic policy and in education. So I assume those are going to be like staples of your policy positions and kind of like, what you're going to be heavily focused on. But and maybe you want to talk a little bit about like, what your approach is going to look like. Obviously, ton of information on your website. People should go check that out. But like, if we were to give us the nuts and bolts version of what your overall agenda is, so that people can have a good sense from that, and then go and do additional research on the website.
Yeah, well, in Maine, we're going to be able to do more with less. And so one of the things, I teach graduate courses, and one of the things that I spend a lot of time on is asking people to be able to innovate and tell other people in your training, and tell me as the professor, you tell me, how is it that you're going to be able to right size and make sure that you're going to be successful in the marketplace? And government right now, Maine government, never needed that so much as we do right now. We're pushing 12,000 employees. They are not economically efficient. And we've got some great state employees. So that's the funny part of it, is that we've got great employees. But I sit there on the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee, and I have for many years, and we're creating new positions in times when we have a budget shortfall. It's unbelievable. So, but I've taken a look at each of those positions, the specific positions themselves, and look at what those positions are responsible for, what are the titles, what are the job descriptions, job specifications. And I know that there is so much waste in government. So when it comes to, starting the discussion that we should have today, I mean it when I say the term right sizing. The state of Maine has far too many employees, and we can reduce them in a humane way, but at any company will tell you across the world, not just across the United States or Maine, that the highest cost is labor. So what we do in the marketplace is that, we look at our revenue, we look at our expenses, and we determine, kind of using a marginal analysis, can we add another employee? What happens at the state level is that's the last thing they look at. That's the last thing they look at. They develop, a new position. And I'm going to complain about one, even though I'm sure it was filled by an excellent person. But we started in the education committee looking last year at this new position, Green Buildings Coordinator. And the person was going to basically work from home, make over $110,000 a year plus benefits. So it's costing us $160,000 a year. And how many new buildings did we have last year? Not very many in education. In fact, if you look at the school construction list, extremely small percentage of those requests were funded. And that is work that can be done at the local level. And
Yeah.
we have AI to help us. We have local zoning to help us. We have professionals that are supposed to be involved in the process anyway and are required through zoning law to help us. So why is the state, putting together that sort of thing? So I like to start with this efficiency, and that way I can talk about tax reduction.
Yeah, so just to be very clear, this is a brand new position. This is at a time where we had a budget shortfall. They're creating this position, or was this already a position that existed?
We're doing it every session. We're doing it every single session. We're between 2 and 250 positions. There were 250 last year. It might have been under 200 this year, but new positions, and there's no need of them. And what we really should be thinking about doing is, how do you reduce workforce in a humane way and rewrite all of those job descriptions so that people can be very effective at what they do in handling their job? And we are not doing that. None of that coordination that occurs in any business is happening in government, with some exceptions. Don't get me wrong. There are actually some in terms of the governor's executive branch, some of those agencies have people that do look at it. It's just that when we get it and we have to approve the budget, it's still not winnowed down to what it should be. And there's a ton of waste. People talk about waste, fraud, and abuse, but I just start with waste. There's an unbelievable amount of waste in Maine state government, and I know where it is, and I can't wait to get to work on it.
Yeah, well, definitely. I know that when we had the initial, I think there was a Common Sense for Maine PAC put on a gubernatorial debate before you had declared. So unfortunately, I don't think you were not participating. But at that, the cheers from the crowd of like 200 people who had gathered to hear these candidates when the term Doge for Maine came out. So definitely, I think there's a lot of people, especially on the conservative side, that want to see reduction in government spending. Waste, I would say waste is abuse of power. So how much of it's fraud's another story. I think there is some concern there, obviously, but there's definitely a lot of excess money that's being spent. You talk about labor, and my understanding, you know this better than I do, is that there's a whole bunch of unfilled positions that are funded, and the money is still spent even though those positions are never filled. And so there's just so much waste in Maine's government.
Yeah, when I was on the taxation committee last term, we had Maine Revenue Services talk about how they were using that money, and a lot of it was going toward overtime. Think about how inefficient that is. A lot of it was, but it was basically a till that they could just use. And why would they ever want to change that? So instead of zero-based budgeting or Doge, we don't go through that exercise, either one of those exercises at all. And that's the tough part of it. In terms of a number, I'm going to give you a number. Right on my website, it'll tell you I've got over $1 billion in tax cuts, over $1 billion in tax cuts, and that's going to be achieved in the very first 2-year biennial budget. And it's not going to be something that is, like pie in the sky. Like you'll hear some people out on the campaign trail say, we're going to get rid of the income tax. Well, in my policy reduces the income tax. One of my tax cut policies reduces the income tax by 20%, because I also have to have some money to deal with the property tax problem. Listen to this, Chuck. Here's one. I really want to get this across to Maine people. The median valuation for a home when our current governor started was around $260,000. It's more than double that now, yet the homestead exemption hasn't even changed. It's still the first $25,000 that you get a break off your valuation, and then you pay taxes on the rest. Well, that is proof that the people that are in charge right now do not care about you. That is the proof, because if they did, instead of being concerned about putting an increase in the minimum wage and setting that equal to the increase in inflation, through the consumer price index. Instead of doing that, they'd be looking at the valuation of homes, and they'd be thinking, oh my gosh, Mainers are getting killed here. We need to make sure that they're taken care of because of the escalation in the valuation of their home. And that's not happening. And people, this is the proof, and this is what I really want you to know. Any one of the people that are listeners to this podcast or viewers can come to my district and look at the conditions of rural Maine homes, and you will see just how those people are getting squeezed. They cannot afford to fix their homes. They're getting taxed to the hilt. There's a massive increase in the amount of people that are late on their property taxes. And sometimes in some of those towns, of course, that's published right in the town report, which I think, that's tough. But it's the truth. It's what's happening. Yeah. And nobody seems to care. In fact, we had, as you know, the senior property tax stabilization program, Chuck, and the Democrats, not only did they get rid of that, but they claimed, they talked about how much that was going to cost. Then they claimed all that money and they put it toward new programs by eliminating the set aside for the cost of that program. It was, I thought it was highway robbery, and it was very difficult to sit on the taxation committee like I did and see that happen.
Yeah, definitely no surprise out of the oligarchs, we'll call them. They're not really the oligarchs; they're really the pawns of the oligarchs. But the establishment, we'll say in Augusta, it's unfortunate they don't. It's obvious to like anybody who's really paying attention that they don't actually care about the big picture, long-term impacts of their policy decisions. Because if they did, they would make sound economic policy. They wouldn't recognize. One of the policies that I know, because I've only been following heavily Maine focused politics for like the past 3 years, but one of the ones there are two that really kind of like triggered. I don't want to say triggered me, but upset me in the economic space. One is the mandate for smaller employers to have retirement plans. And by the way, I spent a decent portion of my life helping people financially, and I think retirement plans are really important. But I also in that time work with small businesses, and this other one impacts small businesses too. And I think, and that's the 1% tax that's come in this year that won't be able to be used until next year on for short-term medical, which I also care about people who have medical stuff, However, when you're making policy, you have to look at the big picture, long-term impact, and not look at the one-off impact, which is effectively what they're doing in this situation. And in both of these, they're not thinking about like the long-term impact of this. That this is putting an increased burden on small businesses that already are struggling. Like Walmart's not struggling; they already have these programs. These bigger corporations are not struggling; they already have these programs. By implementing these types of policies, you're harming small businesses, and these people just don't care.
Yeah, well, paid family leave should be a premium-based approach like it is in New Hampshire. They do have a program that businesses can opt into that allow for that paid family leave. Sure. And paid family leave is popular, so it's not something that we should get rid of, but the structure of it, first of all, is if you look at the 1/2 plus 1/2 equals 1%. You're paying on both ends there. But then if you look at it as it goes forward, it's clear to almost everybody in government that it actually won't fund itself, and the money will run out for that program. So it isn't put together properly. Instead, if we could have looked at an existing model like New Hampshire and many other states have, that is premium based and involves insurance, and would have allowed us to make sure that we didn't promise something that we couldn't deliver, which we do a lot in the state of Maine, and it, as exemplified by the senior property tax stabilization program that we got rid of. We made promises and then we just got rid of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, I think if there's an opt-in and businesses have the opportunity that, at a rate that's more affordable to them, that they have the ability to opt in and offer this to their employees, I think that's great. But forcing businesses is kind of, it's a bit anti-freedom, and I don't think it's helpful. But I think giving businesses an opportunity to help their employees get into that, to have those types of protections, I think is completely, I'm totally fine with that. But I've kind of derailed, and I want to let you get back to some of your policy positions. But obviously, the economy and getting rid of unnecessary taxation and freeing up things to be able to help business grow and in development. And you also, like, you kind of mentioned, and maybe you have some ideas in this direction, about both creating a space where business can kind of come about and exist and grow here in the state, but also where we can have outside investment. And I was wondering if you wanted to share more about that or talk more about that.
Yeah, I really do. It starts with energy. I think most people in the know do know that we, in terms of like the mandates that we were just talking about, we mandated that contracts to these solar farms, some of them owned by out-of-state investors, that they be at twice the wholesale rate. And then we forced our electric companies to pay something, around less than half of that. I mean, so basically what we're doing is we're forcing electric rates to go up so that the ratepayers subsidize solar. And, we can have solar without that. This was, one of the worst policies that Maine has implemented. And of course, I'm 64 years old. So I love to bring that up because I've got the experience. I remember when CMP entered into long-term contracts back in the 80s and the 90s because they were afraid of inflation. And they entered into them at really high rates. And then inflation kind of went away. And we actually had some deflation there for a little bit of time. But Mainers had to pay through the nose. We finally got rates down 11 years ago to a little bit more of a manageable position. And now here we are at 22 cents per kilowatt hour. I would like every single person to go in and read my comparative between the state of Virginia and the state of Maine to look how they have used the supply side to make sure that they're not in the same predicament we're in. About somewhat over 60% of their power is generated by natural gas. 22% of their power is generated by nuclear. And you're looking at somebody that is a proponent of exploring and expanding our opportunities in nuclear. If you have looked at those small nuclear, look at the Gerald R. Ford, for example, that great carrier ship out, and it has two nuclear generators on board. And supposedly, if you took those generators and you hooked them up to Maine, it would power about half of the homes in Maine. So, we're not looking at that at all. And we have to stop by looking at the supply side. Let's expand natural gas. Let's see if we can go to work with propane, because we have no propane plants in Maine like they do in other states. Yet we use a ton of propane to heat our homes. And at my home that I'm sitting in right now, this is heated by propane. And so these gases are clean. They're good for the environment. We've gotten away from some home heating oil, coal, fire plants, you name it. And we are now doing a great job of trying to clean the quality and improve the quality of our air. And while we might not reach some pretty unrealistic and unsustainable environmental goals that the far left has created, we can clean our environment and still make sure that we have wealth generation in our state. And it's really important to understand that energy is the first part, taxation is the second. Now, taxation, right? We took in far less corporate taxes last quarter than we did for the same quarter a year ago. And we took in that report is just out for the first quarter 2025. And of course, I read all those reports, and it drives me crazy because I know that consumers have been hit by inflation, and they're tightening their belt. They're getting nailed by these property taxes and income taxes that you and I have talked about, which have risen. We added, for example, download taxes. We added paint taxes. We added cigarette taxes last term. All of these taxes we added, and at the same time, we're being squeezed. So people have to reduce their own budget to make sure that we're taking care of the state's budget. It's the opposite of what should be happening. It is the absolute opposite. And I've been involved in economic development for a long time, and even in spite of some of these horrible circumstances that are all government created, including inflation. The Federal Reserve is printing more money now than they were last month and the month before. A lot of people don't realize that because we had that period where the inflation was so high, they slowed down, they took money out of the money supply. Well, they're right back at it. I would urge anybody to go to the Federal Reserve website called FRED and look at the graph of M1, and you will see an increase in the printing of money. So what does that do? It makes your dollar devalue. So now you buy less goods and services with those dollars. So you got to pay more to get the same services, the same standard of living. This is what I've been working on my entire career. So anyway, to make a long story short, we had a company from Boston come into, when I was academic dean at Thomas College, they came into the college, they were worried, they wanted labor, and they wanted trained labor. So we started a train the trainer program where our professors went into that company when they moved up, CGI, when they moved up to Waterville, and they got trained by company professionals. Then they came back to the classroom. Then we trained our students. That was one of the innovative things that we offered to make sure that deal got done. You know, the other thing that got that deal done, which always makes me chuckle, we asked the CEO, hey, why do you want to come to Maine? We realize it's a pretty tough business climate. And you know what he said? He said, I like to ski. I like to ski. So it's true. We've got, think of how many people have second homes up here. We're vacation land. And we have the best landscapes in most of the world. Our landscapes are unbelievable. And people are at them right now, and they would love to stay. If we can reduce income taxes, they'll come and live. They will stay here instead of going to Tennessee where there's no income taxes, going to Florida where there's no income taxes, and actually being able to survive in these places as opposed to Maine taking all your money. We've got to turn that around, Chuck. And here's the thing too. Here's one thing I want to tell you, viewers, and your listeners. I want you to think about who's got a voting record among all of the candidates that are out there. Who has a voting record? I have a perfect voting record on the Second Amendment. Over 12 years in the legislature. I have pretty much a perfect record on taxation. I've got a great voting record on these energy issues that I'm talking to you about. And I want to start to talk to you about the drug issue, which is a separate issue. But we talking offline that we might bring that up because that's, you know what, public safety is a major issue in Maine. You've got to have that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's head right into that. I hope maybe we'll get back to education because I think that's one worth tackling. But I think like public safety and what's going on with the cartels, I guess, that exists here in the state of Maine is pretty wild to think that this is what's going on in our state. All while, just for fun, our AG is wasting his time trying to sue oil companies that don't even exist in Maine for climate change and losing a battle, I believe, expected to lose a battle on some gun control related stuff as well. I think the 72-hour waiting period, which is on hold right now, there's that court case, and he's wasting his time with that, all while we have all these crime issues. But yeah, so talk about
I'm going to do that, and I'm going to lead with, to finish up what you were saying there. One of the most difficult things I'll have to deal with is when I go in there, the legislature is going to be able to pick the attorney general, and that is the worst possible way. We're the only ones that do it that way. Why should the majority? Hopefully, the majority will be Republicans, and we'll get somebody that has common sense. But why would the majority go behind closed doors, pick the attorney general, and why would it be done that way? Because if it is, it means the person is guaranteed to be extremely partisan, guaranteed to be.
Right.
And that our attorney general right now, he's come before education, he's come before other committees. He is I'm sure he's a decent man, but he's a very partisan individual, and his positions that are like the ones that you're talking about, they're going to get thrown out of court, are going to cost Maine taxpayers millions of dollars for nothing. There's savings right there, Chuck, that you put your fingers on. But let's talk about the drug trade and the drug problem, because it's a hot issue, because some of it is illegal grows, marijuana grows, cannabis. That's sure, that's a hot issue, but I want to take it a step further. I've got a op-ed coming out in the Bangor Daily later this week, and I hope every single one of your viewers and listeners will read that, because people in the media aren't willing to connect the dots and actually report to us the truths. So first of all, we know that somewhere between 100 and 250 properties, depending on who you talk to, were bought by either Chinese nationals or people that had connections they were of Chinese descent. In a couple of cases in Maine, or at least one that I know of, a person was a naturalized Mainer but had come from China. But a lot of the other ones, there were, in other cases, there were illegals that were involved in the operation. And we know that to be true because the arrests have been made. Not enough arrests, but I've talked to many of the sheriffs who are frustrated with state government because they've backed off enforcement of these operations. Now, what do these operations do? Well, if you're in the marijuana business, the first thing is it's going to drive down the price. And the other problem, of course, that the governor created, and it was the governor, is you put a marijuana place on every street corner, the price is going to go down. So that, the control of the licensure is something I will do. We will make sure that we put a halt on new licenses, and we will get that whole situation under control. But one of the things that is of great concern isn't even the cannabis problem, isn't the cannabis market. It's the fact that Chinese nationals have been caught by federal authorities bringing in bioweapons that can, there are all kinds of different bioweapons, everything from, it makes COVID look like the child's play, what they're bringing in. And there was one person that was arrested trying to smuggle something in, and of course they were working with the University of Michigan. But nationally, we've found several people, and of course some people have gotten through. They haven't all been arrested. They've gotten through. Now, these are agents that can control and destroy crops. We've got the clear and present danger of a war beginning from within. If you don't trust the People's Republic of China, and let me tell you something, I don't trust them. I don't. If they had the chance right now, they would go after the United States, and we have to make sure we understand that. Now, believe it or not, the federal government does understand it. So what I did was I read State Department reports, and I made sure that I provided all of my sources to the BDN about what I was talking about, so that they would end up printing it. They didn't want to print it, but fortunately, we have somebody in the editorial department at the BDN that is actually, she's pretty good. So, and she's willing.
Awesome.
So talk to her, gave her the sources, but these are reports to Congress that clearly demonstrate, and in addition to that, international publications that clearly demonstrate that the Chinese are purposely entering countries with these dangerous agents. And these are things, and again, back to, COVID. If you think COVID was bad, this has the possibility of being far worse, because it's an some of them are agriculturally based agents that can be airborne. And I want us to be concerned about, I'm not, in the, crying and making people scared. And we have to be prepared for this. The state of Maine needs a governor that's prepared for this. We're not crying wolf. That's the term I was trying to get to. We're not doing that. This is a real danger. And we've caught around the world several Chinese nationals coming in with these chemical agents. It is a big, big problem. So some small publications like the Piscataqua Observer had done a great job of covering these things. Of course, they're up in that area where there's a lot of these marijuana grows, and they see, some of the problems, and actually some of the tainted product that comes out of there as well. That's a problem. But honestly, we have to be vigilant as a country. So I wanted to make sure, Chuck, that I came on. We don't have to go on and on about this problem, but bioweapons are a significant problem. And China did sign an accord, and when they sign something, they pay no attention to it. We know that they have dozens of plants that scientifically research and also produce some of these chemical agents. And, I had a lot of friends who went to the Vietnam War, and they came back and they were affected by Agent Orange. If you don't think this stuff can happen, well, I know you do, but people, you've got to wake up. What happens with the far left? They're wonderful souls, but they're so naive about these sorts of things. We cannot let the left dictate policy with that kind of naivete. We can't do it.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see like the naivete, but I think a big part of it for them, and I think this is kind of true in general, right? Is it like, if you're a Republican and you trust Republicans in office, if you're a Democrat, you trust Democrats in office, and you just don't. Whereas we shouldn't really trust anybody. We should, or there's the idea of trust but verify, and I feel like that's really not happening. Again, with the Democrat leadership right now, and it was interesting, you kind of bringing this up, because I remember when Steve Robinson and the Maine Wire started reporting on these illegal marijuana grows. And like, he kept reporting on it, and I was like, all right already, man. Like, okay, they're doing bad stuff, right? And it wasn't until I heard him speak at the Lincoln dinner down here in Cumberland County, where he kind of went into more detail than I had seen before. Not that it wasn't on his website, but I hadn't like seen it all put together, and understanding the whole picture of what's going on with this. It is like, it's not about marijuana. Like, yes, there are legal marijuana grows, but it's not about marijuana. It's about human trafficking. It's about what the Chinese government is bringing in, as you said, and some of what they're doing, they're chemically altering a lot of this marijuana, which is making it dangerous for humans. Even if you didn't like, so this is not, the issue is not about marijuana. It's about crime, organized crime, and about and what they're doing. And the reality is, like, it's not racist to say, which I think is half the problem. I think theoretically, people believe that the reason that the Mills administration is not going after it is that she doesn't want to be called a racist or something along those lines, or maybe something more nefarious. But like, it's not racist to say that China as a country has a desire to take down the United States. They want to replace the United States as the global power, and maybe, even it looks like to me, and maybe they've even publicly made it apparent, that they really kind of want to rule the world. This is what they have their fingers in all kinds of places that I've been outside of America. They have their fingers, their tentacles, we'll say, in Africa as well. And it's interesting what
to the Belt and Road Initiative. I just want to add that they've got France, even, you name it. It's out there.
Well, and they hold the majority or the one of the biggest, we'll call it shareholders, but in U.S. debt, and like they are dangerous and they are a concern, and it's no surprise that they're kind of looking to do this stuff, and we've got to crack down on it. As you said, we have to have a governor who's willing to tackle this issue. So, so
So
I think
because
that's
it's a difference, there's a difference, Chuck, between a freedom-loving asylum seeker who can be and should be reviewed to see whether or not they should be allowed to come into this country, and a dangerous person like Mohammed Atta, who came across the Canadian border, jumped on a plane in Portland, and was part of 911. I'll never forget. Most people my age will never forget where they were when that happened. And people need to realize that, we will be attacked again someday. And the reason national defense is so important, the reason the State Department is an important organization, the reason the CIA, if used properly, is an important organization, the FBI, is because we have to stay ahead of what some of these evildoers figure out. And they are so smart, they can often find ways around the law. For example, I love being a college professor, but in my own profession, we know of some foreign visa holders that came to the United States, were supposed to go to colleges and didn't. And then just once they got here, they just disappeared. Every college had that problem, even last year. So I know that under President Trump, we're not going to have that kind of a significant problem. But if you just look at the Democratic leadership that we had, and I don't think that the president really had the wherewithal to be in charge, to be honest with you, President Biden. I think there were other people who really don't understand these issues that were at the helm, and all kinds of inadequate public safety measures were allowed to occur. It is dangerous for every single one of us. We have to do something about it. I'm trying now as a state senator, obviously, and working my tail off. I just get outvoted an awful lot, Chuck.
It's really difficult to not get outvoted because the Democrats largely vote in step. I was appreciative yesterday. I had Laura Whitcomb, who's the president of the gun owners of Maine, and fortunately she was sharing one of the places where they didn't vote in lockstep against us was in a lot of the gun control measures that came before the legislature, that they voted in our direction, in the direction of freedom and in favor of the Second Amendment, which is enshrined both in the Maine state constitution and in the United States Constitution. And I think it's even more clear in the Maine state constitution, if I can remember correctly. I think it's like shall not be infringed, basically, or questioned. Essentially, the right to bear arms is like, you leave that alone. It's there. But I wanted to have her on partly because we've got that ballot initiative this November, and we need to make sure people get out and vote against the red flag law, because the legislature didn't pass it, but the people may, and we really hope that they recognize the danger. There should be red flags going up about the red flag law because it's, first of all, unnecessary and dangerous to law enforcement and going to be costly, and it's going to make things less safe. But yeah, I was fortunate. I thought we were fortunate that they didn't vote in lockstep on that. But generally speaking, what you're dealing with up in Augusta, the last couple of sessions that you've been up there, is basically just Democrat rule. They just walk in lockstep and do what they want, and negotiation is not part of the process.
No, it isn't. We have just barely enough to get by on the Second Amendment. It's the same 2 or 3 in the House and the Senate that are willing to say, hey, look, this is in the Constitution. So what that means is that 90-something% of the legislators in the Democrat Party don't care about the Constitution. They don't care about the Constitution. This concerns me greatly, that they don't have a respect for the Constitution. Just as an example, we could throw something out there. How about this gubernatorial race? It says right in the Maine Constitution that it will be a plurality. So what do they want to do? Change that. What do they want to do? Make sure that the June primary is using that ridiculous system that we have now, and that people don't understand, where you have to rank choice, be a ranked choice voter. These are the kinds of things that they do on a regular basis. They either haven't read the Constitution or read it and don't want to know anything about it. It's frustrating. And this is not the average Maine Democrat. We're talking about leaders in Augusta. They have their own agenda. And here's another thing, Chuck, for example. Can you imagine giving people 24-hour notice before we have a public hearing? That's what they do. 24 hours. And sometimes, believe it or not, the bill that you're going to have a public hearing for it's a draft bill. It's not even fully completed. These are the kinds of things that they do, and so it's very frustrating to see the difference in the 1990s when I was in to today. It's like night and day. In the 1990s, the Democrats had guys like Joe Mayo. He was the clerk of the House, and if there was something out of order, he referred to the rules. He referred to Mason's. He referred to Reed's rules, Robert's rules, and the joint rules of the House and Senate, and the body rules. And we would have to go by the rules. And he would talk about the Constitution. Those people are mostly gone. I mean, there are still people out there. There are still the Bill Diamonds of the world. I wish he was still in office. Very good Democrat. Barry Hobbins was respectful of the Constitution. I liked working with Barry Hobbins. And there were a few others, but now they just stick together, and because they know they can get anything that they want, and they have a money advantage in the elections. So that's something that we really have to talk about as well.
Well, we definitely saw that in the initial. I think the initial donations that came in for the campaigns in the gubernatorial race, you had Shenna Bellows, who, speaking about not caring about the Constitution, was recently bragging. There are videos out there that you can find. She was recently bragging about the fact that she tried to keep Trump off the ballot. So just for fun, right? She's one of the gubernatorial candidates on the Democrat side, but her, Angus King, I think the third, and Hannah Pingree, all raised over $500,000 for their campaigns, and the top Republican was at like a little over 300,000. And so like they definitely have a financial advantage over us, and it helps that they have activist George Soros spending money. Like, I don't even know where he makes money. He must get stock tips and cheat the world on the stock market. And
I hear recently he's been getting from Nancy Pelosi, but that's beside the point. So here's the thing. I'm going to touch on something that's really it's a touchy issue. The Democrats, not only do candidates spend their own money, but they line up PACs that they don't know about, to help them and spend even more money on their campaign. And that is the biggest farce in the history of state government. Now, I want to talk a little bit about that. First of all, people were asking me, well, where are you on campaign finance? I want every single person to hear this, because most people know I'm a clean elections candidate. And here's the deal. The clean election system for legislators, and I don't blame them for using it. They're good. Those are all good people, right? That system is completely wrong, and it should be abolished immediately. And here's why. A legislator can, actually hundreds of legislators, even those that run and lose, get on clean elections, spend millions of taxpayer dollars over many, many years, and the leadership of the legislature can start up their own PACs and supplement. So basically what they're doing is they're supplementing money that they're raising through the PACs with taxpayer dollars. Now, then people are like, well, why are you clean elections? Well, here's why. Because if you're running for governor, you can't set up a leadership PAC. You can't take any PAC money. You can't take any corporate money. You can't take any money at all. And so when I actually tell people, aren't you against spending by big business or by the lobby? Isn't that what you told me you're opposed to? Well, you have an opportunity to put somebody in that's going to be only accountable to the people. And you're going to spend about $1 million to do that. But you're also going to get from me somebody that is promising that I will do everything in my power to abolish the legislative access to clean elections, because it is the biggest farce in the history of state government. And there's absolutely no reason why legislative leaders should be able to take from any source that they want, then set the agenda. But legislators should go out there and collect $5 checks and get $80,000 to run their campaign and $80,000 to lose campaigns. The whole thing, Chuck, is 100% wrong. I'm going to tell it like it is. This is, and I truly believe this. I am going to be, if I'm elected, and I plan to be, the first person that didn't take any money from a special interest or a lobby. And I am very excited about that, because I've heard people on the national level asking for that level change. Well, here's the chance to do it. And I'll have pretty much the same amount of money that the people that are raising funds will have to spend. So I'll be able to be competitive. And I'm excited to do this. As a legislator, I won 6 terms as a legislator. I never took clean elections money. I always funded them myself, every single one of them. I've even had a PAC in the past where I spent money on candidates who are not running clean elections and spent money on other things. You've been to some of my fundraisers, my friend. You've been to some of them, and you're having one yourself on a boat that's something like the one I had last year. Nice work there. But this is what has to happen. We have to get off of special interest money to see what kind of changes can be made under the new conditions. It'll be it's a massive experiment, but I like it. And I do promise that in my first biennial budget, I won't put funding in there for clean elections for the legislature.
That sounds great. So I'll just do a little quick ad since you mentioned it. Is we do have a great fundraising event that's also just going to be a great time next Thursday. I mistakenly in an email to the town chairs said August 31st, but it's actually July 31st. So next Thursday, starting at 5:30, the boat leaves at 6. We're going to be on the Songo River. Queen, which is out in Naples on Long Lake. For anybody who's interested in joining, you can go to ccrcme.com and find the event, and you can get your tickets to join us. There are going to be 4 gubernatorial candidates, including Senator and gubernatorial candidate Jim Libby, and a couple and a number of others. You can check us out on the website and join us. It's going to be a great time. There's going to be some hors d'oeuvres and a cash bar. So come and check it out.
It's an incredible sunset cruise. As you know, we threw a really incredible fundraiser last year, and we had Governor LePage came on because he was, he was planning for his next run, and we were so thrilled to have him. We had a lot of other really big names, and the owner of that Songo River Queen, to make a long story short, investment matters. He came, he bought the Songo River Queen. He worked with the town of Naples to make sure he had everything in order. And then he bought another smaller boat, which people take out as well. And they can go through the Songo locks with that smaller boat. And in between Long Lake and Sebago Lake, it's an incredible time that you have out there. And I really encourage people to get up to my neck of the woods. Naples is in my Senate district. It's one of the most beautiful towns in America. Forget about Maine. And you can go up there and rent a jet ski. You can go on the Songo River Queen. You can go up there with your boat. You can go up to Harrison and, put out anchor and get in that shallow part where everybody goes swimming, and you can't get up on the sandy beach, but you can go swimming out there, and all kinds of boats just go out there. It's a party boat. It's Party Boat City. Chuck, I'm so glad that you're spending the money in Maine here and doing things like that. Those fundraisers are really important. They're important for all of us.
Yeah, it's great because it's a fun time. Everybody who goes is going to have a good time. Sunset cruise, in late July. It'll be a great time, and have, again, food and connect, and you can ask questions of different of our Republican gubernatorial candidates. So come check it out. I wanted to comment on like the clean election stuff, because it was one of the things that, going into running for political office, that when I first ran in 2022, my race in 2024 is a little different, and I actually ended up running clean in 2024. But look, the way that I look at this stuff is like, I'm not going to hold against anybody. Obviously, I did it myself. Somebody who ran clean, quote unquote clean, because we have to use the current system in order to win. And then once we win, we can fix the system, right? Because I think that most of your conservatives, I had people who were out there who were like, I can't morally, I can't get over, I will never give to this because I don't believe in it. I'm like, I don't believe in it either. And I'll tell you why in just a second. But well, you've kind of said it, but it was like one of those things that, like, they call it clean elections, and that kind of gives the insinuation that if you don't run clean, what are you running? Dirty? And that's just not the case, right? And in principle, it sounds like a good idea, right? So all of your money that's given directly to your campaign is only influenced by people in your district who give $5 contributions on your behalf to the Clean Elections Fund, right? That's a great idea in the sense that, not that money's coming from the government, but in the sense that it should mean that only people in your district can influence the election. But as you've stated, they can still, there are PACs and different organizations that can still spend money on behalf, either for them, in favor of them, or against their opponents. And so this is a crafty thing that was put in there by the Democrats to make it look like they were cleaner. It's all about appearances for them. It's not about reality.
Yeah.
And it's just it's a farce.
That's an excellent point. And here's the thing. I've done the same thing, Chuck. I've advised some people to go ahead and run clean because that's the law, right? And so, but if the objective of clean elections is to get influence out of the decision-making at the legislative level, we couldn't be further away from that. That is, so it should end immediately. And that is not to say that any person that ever ran on clean elections, I appreciate the fact that they did, and it's actually hard to qualify, but it's not doing its objective. However, like I said, if you're running for governor in the executive branch, you cannot start a super PAC. You cannot start a leadership PAC. You can't take money from any lobbyist. It's really strict. And if we could get one branch, the executive branch, in there where somebody actually hasn't been receiving money from this, that, and the other, and I could name, I'm not going to, but I could name off all the special interests. People wonder why things go the way they do. A lot of legislators have integrity and the money doesn't matter to them, but it only takes a few to tip the balance on the votes. If you've got 10 people in the Maine Senate, or the Maine House even, that you've lobbied and you successfully lobbied them and you contributed to the campaign, you got all this other money flowing in, then obviously, I'll never forget, Chuck, I'm going to give you this real quick story. One time I had a bill, and I believe it was the gasoline additive bill. We were trying to ban a substance that we did ban, MTBE, that was in gasoline. This is back in the 90s. And so the bill passed the House, and that's where I was at the time. It went over to the Senate. So I went into the Senate chamber and I watched the vote, and I saw one of my co-sponsors vote against the bill. And I left there, we lost by one. I left there dejected. I went down to the Elections Commission and I opened up their file to see where their money had come from. And the rest of the story. Yeah. It came from the lobby that opposed my bill. Now, fortunately, believe it or not, Governor King called me up the morning after the legislature adjourned, sign or die. And he said, "Why were you so against MTBE?" And I said, well, because once it bonds with water, it stays there. You can't really clean it. and we're having these serious pollution problems in other parts of the country, we have to ban it. This isn't like an if or a when. It has to happen. And the next day he called me back and he said, we're going to have a press conference and I want you to come up to it. And I'm going to start with an executive order. We're going to ban the use of gasoline with MTBE in it. And so instead, we added ethanol later on down the line. There's always a way to get, work on these things. But I like to tell that story so that people understand that I lost that vote. I feel like it was because of the lobby. Happens all the time up there. And this could be, 26, could be a breakthrough year for the people of Maine. If you want to get out of this whole idea that we were funding every legislator, every House member, 151 House members, Chuck. And there's two or three people running in each of those, and sometimes more. And a very large percentage of these folks are running on clean elections. The winners and the losers, like I said, same as the Senate, it's 35 members, lots of them running clean elections. And it has no bearing on outcomes because of the way you can, leaders can take in money and start their own PACs, and because of the influence, it's ridiculous. So I'm running on that. I won't make friends in the government sector by saying these things, but they all know it's true.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of friends in the government sector, I wanted to get into like one of the things that's happened in the gubernatorial race since the legislature ended is one of our state senators who is formerly a registered Republican is now running for governor as an independent. And I just wanted to, obviously this is somebody that you've worked with in the Senate for many years and know pretty well. And one of the concerns, it's Rick Bennett, just for fun, if you're like, who is it? So one of the concerns, like initially, like leading up to this point or number of months ago, everybody was thinking that Jared Golden was potentially going to run for governor instead of running for CD2, and that we would have a third party candidate who is more on the Democrat side and might split their vote and give the Republicans a really good chance at winning. Having him move out and be replaced with a former Republican, Rick Bennett, has done kind of the opposite. So I just want to kind of get your take on that whole situation, Rick himself, and kind of I think there's also the fun, interesting thing I'll just throw in there too before you go of the fact that like kind of I wonder if this was part of his campaign idea, was to do some things that was voting in favor of Democrat ideas. And so he voted in favor of keeping biological males in girls' sports on multiple occasions in opposition to the Republicans and really the majority of the people here in the state of Maine. And so this is a really interesting development. And again, given your knowledge of him, I just want to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, first of all, Rick has been a 33-year friend of mine. That will not ever change. However, I'm a basketball coach. I've had a long career coaching at the high school and the college level. I've coached in the Civic Center. I've coached in the college playoffs. And I was one of those, not as loud as Laurel Libby, who is, I'm sure, her husband, if you go 7 generations back, he's probably related to me. But I was a very, very strong advocate of protecting girls' sports. And before I even get into Rick, what I want to say is that if you can you and your listeners get me through the primary, and I've got a great base over here in Senate District 22 and around many other towns that I've already represented, it's a strong base in southern Maine. If you can get me by, you'll have somebody, I'll be the only of maybe 3 candidates person that is on that side of the issue that wants to protect girls' sports. Now, why did Rick Bennett do it? I don't know what his rationale was. He wasn't a coach. Maybe he doesn't, fully have the same background and feelings about categorizing sports like I do. I think there's nothing wrong with the girls' category. There's nothing wrong with the boys' category. And I'll tell you this right now. We created a unified category. It's one of the best things that we ever did for people with special needs. They're out there playing basketball as fans, going to these games and enjoying every single bit of it. Competition is fun. We can have a whole nother category. Like if I'm a golfer and I'm a trans and I put up I shoot 72 over 18 holes, I can compare that to anybody in the country because electronically we can now, and we should, so that we're not violating Title IX. But we're also not violating Title IX by, when we do that, we would be violating it if we don't give them an opportunity. And so it doesn't, and we're not violating anything by protecting women's sports. So I was so disappointed with Rick Bennett on that vote. He gave a speech before I gave mine. He sits right behind me, and I was glad to stand up and give the other view. I actually thought some Democrats would actually listen to me, understand my background in athletics. I mean, I ran hoop basketball camp for many years. I started the Waterville Summer League we had 30 high schools in that league. I was a coach at Gorham High School, I was a coach at Thomas College. I was a player at Bon Eagle. There's no way I'm not going to defend women in sports, but it goes further than that for Rick. I mean, he is a moderate. Often he didn't vote with us. But, he was the Senate president as a Republican. And I just think he's really hurt himself. And I'm going to say this. I know some of the people that support him because they're friends of mine. Maine is a small state. I know some of these people. A lot of these people voted for Mills in the last election. This is a fact. I know them. I know who they voted for. A lot of them voted for Mills in the last election. They did not vote for LePage. So I think automatically some Republicans think that Rick Bennett is going to hurt us because he's in the middle and he used to be a Republican. Actually, his credentials among Republicans now are shot. They are shot. And I think he does have a base. I just think that there's a limit to that base. And I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, this is just me. He'll probably say the same about me, but I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up dropping out. I don't think he's going to have the base that he needs in the middle. A lot of people disagree with me on that, but I'll tell you right now, I'm very disappointed that he's left the Republican Party because we're Big Ten. We needed him. We needed him just like we need Laurel Libby or somebody on the right that's even a lot further than her. We need these people because we're the common sense party. We're the party of common sense. It doesn't make common sense for Rick to take that kind of position. In the end, it'll hurt him.
Yeah, well, I thought it was really weird. Like, I understand, like, if you're planning to run as an independent, like picking some issues and voting with the Democrats, like if I were in that position, like, okay, that makes sense. But picking that issue that, like, actually the data says that the majority of Democrats actually don't agree with that. Democrats in Maine, from the polling that I've seen. And so, like, why would you try to die on that hill where I think that's going to hurt the Democrats? And I feel like though, like, let's just be completely honest. I think that issue is a big issue. I think there are some other issues that are pretty big issues, but not big in the sense that I think is going to have a significant impact on how people vote. I think people are much more interested in fiscal policy and like energy and housing and the economy than they are in girls' sports, especially where one of the common refrains is, well, there are only two that are doing it here in the state of Maine. And I still think if it's an injustice, it's an injustice. And I'm actually more concerned personally with like the spaces, like girls' locker rooms and bathrooms, girls being forced to change in front of biological males and stuff like that. I'm more concerned with that than I am. I think the athletic piece is important, and I'm not saying it's not, but I'm more concerned with some of these other ones. I still don't think the average person is going to make their vote based on these issues. Again, it's mostly about my wallet, my pocketbook. Do I feel like my rights are being infringed upon? And so maybe it was a good tactic, but it'll be interesting. I think there are a lot of people that are just frustrated with the right and frustrated with the left. So who knows if he makes it to the general election? I think he'll definitely have some support. But one of the things that we also know is that people want to vote for somebody who has a chance. And I think that most likely you're going to have a lot of people vote R and a lot of people vote D, and a small number of people vote the other way. He's not Angus King 2.0. I don't think he has the clout or whatnot of what Angus King had. So I don't see this as being effective. And I think, again, if I were in his shoes, I would probably pick some issues that were that Democrats are in favor of more so than ones where a lot of them are not in favor of. And so, anyway.
But don't forget, Angus King, when he was governor, is not Angus King, the senator. Angus King, when he was governor, he came into our caucus and he said, what are your top 3 priorities? And then he went to the Democrat caucus. What are your top 3 priorities? One of our priorities was lowering the sales tax rate. I had several towns on the New Hampshire border that I represented in the Senate. And we lowered the sales tax rate from 5.5% back down to 5%. Now, since then, they've been raising it, but that was one of the, I want people to know, I led that effort. It's one of the few times in history that we were able to lower a tax rate, and I'm going to do it again. That's my plan. And I know it's the plan of a lot of other Republicans too. You want to listen to them. But I wouldn't count on that from Rick in the middle, or I know for a fact people on the right can talk about. They really can't talk about tax relief because they've done the opposite. They haven't provided it. Yeah. All they've done is look for new revenue so that they can start new programs in housing. Some programs in housing are good, but there's no plan, a comprehensive plan for housing. There was just bill X, Y, Z, let's do them all and spend money on them. I mean, that's just the way the legislature works, and we need to take a good, solid look at how that works. But anyway, I got off track, and I want to make sure that we talk about the November election. Keep in mind that we're going to have a Republican. I don't know of any Republican now who does not support girls in athletics. And to take what you said a step further, our best player in my high school basketball team, he got caught when he was in 8th grade because there's a limit to the amount of players you can have on a team. If you're cutting a girl and you're putting a trans on that team, you're doing a disservice to girls across the country because it's happening elsewhere as well. We simply cannot do that to really maybe satisfy one person's issues or wants and hurting all these other people. It's just not fair.
Yeah, and that's the issue. The issue is of fairness and I think and safety. I think is the other side. So
we saw the injuries.
Yeah, so I think you were there this last week. We had an event. The Cumberland County Republicans put on an event in Topsom, and even though we're like 5 months into this issue having kind of blown up, we still had 180 to 200 people show up in support. We had rallies early on of about 1,000 people in Augusta and 500 people in Augusta showing up on this issue, and there is still a lot of energy behind it. Again, I don't think it in and of itself moves the election, but I do think it's mobilizing people, and I think that it is an important issue. And one of the things that I wish more people would kind of think about that are kind of like more on the middle left, right, is because who generally agree with us on this issue is look at it and say, geez, if they're that kind of radical over there, what are they doing elsewhere? Maybe I'm wrong about my ideas about the other things that they're doing in other fields. And, again, it seems to me like being a Democrat, voting for Democrats is a largely untenable thing right now, because it seems like on all the major issues, they're on the wrong side, where in the past, at least, they kind of had the appearance of being in the right, but they've just been so radicalized and in just about everything. So
we're still, as Republicans, conservative thinkers, and you can go back to but really there was a time in Maine when we were even voting against FDR. I mean, there was a time in Maine when Republicanism was strong. We still have those conservative roots, but the one thing about Republicans is often they're the silent majority if they're the majority, and we don't stand up. I want to give Laurel Libby credit for standing up. And I went to that presentation, and I was impressed because she talked about the First Amendment. She talked about freedom of speech, and she actually went out and talked to the protesters and said, you have every right to be here, and I want to encourage you to be here because we both have a lot to say and we need to say it. And there used to be a respectful exchange of ideas. And I know one thing, I've never said anything negative about an opponent in my entire career. And I've been elected, you know, I've been elected 6 different times. So been on the ballot 15 times and won 13. I just don't see how we can continue in Maine putting each other down. And so I like Laura Libby's approach because it was respectful. People don't necessarily agree with all of the things that she did, but I agree with her positions. And she is providing the energy that Republicans need. There are other people providing it as well. And we need to get behind that energy and grow it. And, you know, it does start with the Constitution. So I was impressed that we were there talking about, we weren't just talking about the issue that where she ended up being censured. And, you know, we could have rehashed that, I guess. Instead, she was giving the 200 people that were there a lesson in the importance of the Constitution. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, no, it was a really great time, a lot of really great energy and good people, and I think everybody who was there had a good time. And there's been a lot of posts on social media getting the stuff up there. And so we're thankful for that, getting the message out, because free speech is what it's about. And again, that event, the people on the other side tried to get it canceled. They tried to get the band that was playing to cancel. Forced us to get security through the Thompson Police Department, who did a fantastic job, did over and above what was required of them, as well as the Saginaw County Sheriff's Department also showed up.
It worked in reverse for you, Chuck, because I know you were responsible for helping to put that together. And so all of the media hype was around all of that, like, you know, the school system and the decision that they supposedly had to make, the public safety people that had to work at, that got you a lot more publicity, and it did the opposite of what some people wanted it to do, which a lot of people don't understand how that works, but that's the way it works. And I actually thought it was great. It helped with the turnout.
Yeah, no, it really, I think it definitely did. And there were a lot of people that protested outside. As you mentioned, Laurel went and told them that she was going to continue to fight for their right to speak freely in this country. They didn't really care what she had to say. They were like, oh, well, no, thanks. But I think it was a great sentiment on her part. And ultimately, like, we had some people outside who were just trying to kind of be out there with the crowd and talk to people and engage with people. Because one of the things I've talked about a lot in this podcast in the past, it's kind of died away recently, but is that in addition to protecting the First Amendment, Second Amendment, all these other things, we need to be better as a society. And I think the Republicans need to lead the way in this, in engaging in civil discourse, right? So we need free speech. And since we have it, we need to use it, right? And so we need to seek to engage in a civil way. And one of the things that kind of came about as a result of that event is next Monday, I'm going to be interviewing a Democrat legislator who is from that area, who was at the event and wanted to come on. And I was like, well, who are you? I don't even know who you are. And we had a conversation and we had some civil discourse. And did we agree on everything? No. Did we find common ground where we could agree on some things? Absolutely. I think we did. And I hope that that's what's going to happen on the podcast next Monday. Who knows? Stay tuned. Check us out. But in a lot of that happened outside, and there were some people that were surprised by, like, didn't even realize what our event was about, simply because we had invited Laurel Libby. They thought that this was a trans bashing event, which is not at all what it was. And really
at all.
No, not even. And that's not what she stands for and not what she said, but that's the perception, right?
That's the perception. And that's what some would want you to have, that perception too. And what was good about it was, on a beautiful day in the middle of a Maine summer, you're lucky to get 6 to 12 people, not 200. So that really, it goes to show that some people really do care, and people on both sides. They really do care. One of the things that was a little disturbing for me was, a lot of the people that were in Laura Libby's, what was the name of that? What was the name of that venue?
It's the Orion Performing Arts Center.
Yeah, the people that were in the Orion Performing Arts Center generally were all adults of voting age. The people that were outside protesting, there were a lot of little kids out there, and I struggle with that. Like, yes, teach them how to do it, but let's not take advantage of kids. And sometimes I see that, and at that event, I saw that, and as an educator, I didn't feel comfortable with some of it.
Yeah, it definitely can be really toxic. Again, we had some people outside that I think did a good job engaging in civil discourse and help people realize, oh, this is what this event is really about. And there was some negativity there, and they booed everybody as they left the event, as people went to their cars, and so I think they walked through the shame tunnel, shame. Yeah, but ultimately it was a great event, and I think like fighting for these types of things, and it shows that this is an issue that people do care about. Again, I don't know that they care about it as much as their wallet, but they do care about it, and it's important. So I really want to thank you for coming as well. But as we move on, one of the things that's kind of branches us into the issue of education, and maybe we'll have this be our last thing that we discuss before we let you go. But like, obviously, your history as an educator and what's going on here in the state of Maine. Talk to me about like what's happening, why it's happening, and what we need to do to fix it.
A lot. Well, the first thing that most conservatives say correctly, and that is that, when you just say, well, we need to return to the basics, we really do. And part of it, I mean, there's so much that goes around that, so for example, I'm on the AI commission, the state AI commission, and, so are some people in the education department, including the commissioner. And, I was explaining to them that we have to equip students and help them understand how to use AI. AI is like an extension of your hand, and you can innovate and create at 10 times the rate that you can with any other implement. So we need to explain that to them. Well, the DOE came back and said, oh, well, we have a toolkit on our website that tells teachers how they should deal with. That's not, I have a son that's a senior next year at Bonnie Eagle, and he'll tell you as well as any other kid, they are not being trained. A lot of the teachers are saying, don't use that in my class. Well, okay, but there should be an elective course for people that really do want to become good at AI. And there also should be, and what my daughter experienced was professors who said, I want you to use AI. I'm going to put it in the rubric in just this part of the assignment, and you need to demonstrate how you used AI to make this assignment, this project better. And so it's really important that in the state of Maine that we get ahead of this, and it won't cost money. Kids are already engaged deeply in AI. They know how to create anything you ask them, but they often don't know enough about how to ask the question of AI to generate results that are really usable. And they don't know then how to put those results into a market and into play and be able to make money with it, or just in the arts or in music or any way you want. So we are not in a position to do that. And as you know, we are not doing very well when it comes to measuring standardized outcomes in Maine. We're on the low end of that, and different organizations give different results. But the fact is that we're not in the top half in SAT scores. We're not in the top half. We're in the very bottom in NAEP scores. We're in the bottom in pretty much every standardized score. And in elementary school, 4th and 8th grade, we know that only 25 to 35% of students are at grade level. And so I am an educator, and I know exactly how to train. And the first thing I put out a last year a white paper on this, and I've included some of it in my campaign. It's definitely on my website. But we need experts to go in from outside of the school system to go in and train. In a couple of these local school districts, I took down what each of them were offering for training in the spring term, and most of it was DEI related. And I don't mind diversity. I do not mind inclusion, but your definition of equity better be gosh darn good, because there's no legal definition of it in Maine law that is suitable. And it's basically Robin Hood stuff. And that's not the way. Everyone's got a different path to success. And we have to help all those young people. I've been working with young people for 40 years. We have to help all those young people become great at what they want to do. And actually the University of Maine system, Colby College and others are working with AI now at the experimental level. They're in a position to go in and help teachers learn about it. So to have an existing school system take an existing teacher and talk about DEI, and that's going to be your training for the semester, that is absolutely not getting the job done. So there's that. There's also disruption, and to make a long story short, absenteeism in Maine is a huge problem. And the state's approach to absenteeism is a big issue. For example, in one local school district, we had the DHHS finally go in and do a door knock, and the student hadn't been to school for a total of 50 days for part of a school year. Well, guess what? They did a door knock. There was no follow-up. The next year, the student wasn't there for over 70. They had absences. And so we don't have a good approach to making sure that parents get help to actually do their job and send kids to school. So there's so many more issues. I want you to please go to jimlibbyforgovernor.com and see the detail I put up there. I interrupted you, I think. Go ahead.
Oh, I was trying to interrupt you, actually. Well, you mentioned, and I think it's an important point, that sometimes we have such an overreaction, I think, or such a strong reaction, should say, to DEI that there are some people in our camp, in our side of the aisle, will say that think that diversity is bad now, and I don't think that's the case. I think diversity is a good thing, and I think there's a lot of data to suggest that having different people with different perspectives and different worldviews and different lived experiences, if you put all those people in the same room, you can learn, you can get further than if you have a bunch of people who think the same. Like, this is like, if you don't understand that, you're missing out on a lot of reality. I've learned so much from other people with different perspectives, different backgrounds. My travels with my wife in East Africa, I've learned a lot there, and I just think that is a reality. It's the main issue that I have with DEI is the equity piece. I do have a little bit of it. I generally don't have a problem with inclusion, except when in inclusion means that I have to agree with your pronouns and things like that. That's a problem. I'm all about including people, but don't make me change the words that I have to say. That's a violation of free speech. We'll go back to that. It's either compelled speech or chilled speech. So you got to include people without limiting their First Amendment rights, obviously. But equity is the primary issue.
Part of freedom is the ability to have self-determination, Chuck. And so what you're saying really puts the finger on that, because if instead you're forcing me to accept some worldview, you have it wrong.
I was having a conversation with a family member who doesn't agree on like the transgender issue, and they were basically saying, well, in order for you to have a conversation with this person, you have to agree, you have to use some of their language. And I'm like, don't you understand how that you're saying I'm the problem because I won't come to the table? I'm happy to discuss anything and to have civil discourse and try to understand this stuff and give you an opportunity, give anybody an opportunity to change my mind. I'm not guaranteeing that I will change my mind, but I'm willing to have that conversation. I'll talk to anybody, right? but I won't agree with you about things that I don't agree about in order to come to the table. That's not okay. That's you trying to force things on me in order for us to be able to have a conversation. I'm not forcing anything. You can use what you want, say how you want. I'm just saying you can't force me, and that's the big problem with the way in which inclusion is applied. Equity, though, as you kind of pointed out, is really the big issue there, because equity is equal outcomes regardless of the performance of those involved. And this is obviously, we hear these things about, like, we think of when a pilot. Do you want a pilot who got their job because of equity? Do you want a surgeon who got their job because of equity? No, that's dangerous. That's scary. That's where bad things happen. And we saw it in the Biden administration, and all of his appointees almost exclusively were that type of thing. And these were people who are incredibly incompetent. And it had nothing to do with their gender, their sexuality, the color of their skin. They were incompetent people. And that's the problem with equity. And it's also, I would say, the other problem with equity is that it's racist, not just against white people. It's basically saying that people who are minorities, people of color, people of whatever, are not smart enough or good enough to do it on their own. And I think that's offensive. And so, yes, I'm glad that you highlighted the E. So, yeah, DEI is a huge problem. It's not helping in our education system. One of the things that I'm curious about, and we didn't have a conversation about this beforehand, so feel free to be like, I got to do some more, give that some more thought, but maybe you have. And one of the things that when I look at, and I agree with a lot of this, right? But a lot of us on the right tend to focus when we talk about education on the wokeism, on things like DEI, on things like the kind of the transgender stuff that's happening in like elementary schools, where they're talking about not just transgender, but just sexuality in general, and in places where it's just incredibly inappropriate. The idea that the left lost their mind when in Florida they said third grade and under, you can't talk about sex and sexuality. Like, third grade and under only? Like, why are like it's like this? These are things that parents should be teaching kids, not the education system. So those are problems for sure. And there are certain academic elements of the way in which they go about things, like proficiency based learning, which is the opposite of what it sounds like, that are problems. But one of the challenges, I have a number of educators that are friends of mine, and a lot of the challenges, you talked about absenteeism, but I think that's one of them. But a big part of the problem, I think, is like kind of like absent parents. Parents are the one of the big problems that's actually driving test scores the way that they are not just these things. These things are happening, right? These issues are impacting that, the overemphasis on DEI, the lack of emphasis on the essentials. But I think there are also problems in like broken homes and families where children are not getting the love and care and support they need in the home. And how do we, like, because that's a real challenge that we also need to address. And I don't know how, like, and I don't know that I don't hear a lot of people on either side of the aisle, really. I mean, on the left, they're like, we need more special ed teachers because these kids have problems. And it's like, how do we as a society, how do we fix this problem and stop there being like, and kind of get parents more engaged and really more doing their job?
Yeah, well, first of all, my wife is a special ed teacher, so I'm really proud of that. But the very first thing that I did right after I declared that I was going to run, I was kind of waiting to see what Sean Moody would do. Sean Moody's a lifelong friend of mine, and I didn't think he had the fire in the belly, so I ended up saying I got to run, and he still hasn't talked about whether he's going to enter. So when the minute I decided I'm going all in, and I know that this job is something that I would do well at. I went and I saw Bill Diamond, because he published, one of the best resources that we have in, dealing with some of these horrible deaths that kids in state custody have experienced. And, what I've learned also as a state senator in dealing with individual cases, and I've done it so many times. I got cases now I can't give you details about because it would be not legal, but there are parents out there that are, they're in their 30s and, they're still on drugs, or they're still experimenting with some serious drugs, or they've been in and out, they've been incarcerated, in and out of the jail. and they can't be good parents. So one of the things that I know with the most extreme cases is that we have to have a foster parent system that is far more researched and detailed than we have it. And it's going to be very difficult because there's a shortage in that area. So this is a case-by-case basis kind of thing that we have to do, Chuck. And we do have to have mental health resources. We do have to have drug counseling. But you know what we can't do? We can't have programs that give people 100 needles in exchange for one. And because this is, some of these people are parents. And this is causing a serious, serious problem in Maine. Now, I hope that some of you get a chance to listen to the chief over in Sanford just had a sit down with Steve Robinson of the Maine Wire. I haven't heard an interview of a law enforcement official that was that good in a long time, because he talked about all of the issues that they see and that they have to deal with in the homes. And, he talked about the problem with bail that we have here in Maine. He talked about the problem with child custody that we have here in Maine. These kids can't be in drug houses. I've worked with the DHHS and basically demanded that they get kids out of homes, but there's way more in my district that I've got to get them out too. And so the basic safety net that's the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We have to take care of that safety first and get kids in a space where they want to learn. A lot of these kids, when they actually do go to school, they're excited about it. But the next day, there's a reason that the parents came up with that they're not going to school. So we have to do a far better job. There actually has to be consequences. I know that the left hates consequences.
They really do.
To be consequences. A lot of the superintendents that I talk to, we have this law, that doesn't allow them to work with problem kids, and maybe suspend them for a couple, 3, 4, 5 days if they're 5th grade or below. But you know what? If there's no consequence, what opportunity did the child have to learn? A consequence is the opportunity to learn and improve. And also, one of the things, there are some things that the DOE gets right. And right now they have a new program called the BARR program, BARR, where they encourage teachers to develop relationships with the kids. And you know what? That's something I've done for my entire career. And that's something I know my wife does, and friends of mine who are teachers. I can think of, I'm in Standish now, I can think of a teacher down the road here that they make a point out of making it enjoyable for a child to be in school. And they give them all the support they need when they achieve things. And that makes them want to come back to school. And we can't, like this whole idea that children should be choosing in their own mind which gender they are at these ages and running around infecting the ideas of other kids. We can't have that. But we know that gender identity was put in the Maine Human Rights Act on purpose. And it is one of the biggest, most egregious mistakes that we ever made. Now, do we want genders to have protections of course we want constitutional protections for the genders, but it's completely undefined in law as to what that really means.
I think there are other laws that already protect people. I think like so I think it's I'm not an expert on how they wrote that, but that law in particular. But like I think there are ways to ensure that people are not mistreated based on things that don't matter. Right. Right. And I also think that a free market, like I think there's a better way to go about handling that even than legislation in a lot of ways. But yeah, no, I definitely hear.
But school choice tax legislation There should be at least some competition between schools. Now, it doesn't have to be all out, over the top school choice, but listen to this. We had a governor who, when the appeal process was made for a kid that was denied by the superintendent agreement, denied school choice, they wanted to go to the next school system over. Maybe they had a problem in the school system they were in. But we had a governor that would make sure that stuff all got approved. That child that was having a problem in their school system, maybe there was a serious problem. They were able to go to the next school town over to school there. Well, now we have a governor, and there's only been you could count on on 10 fingers or less how many kids have been able to go through that appeal process. People are getting turned down. Now, there are still a lot of superintendent agreements that actually get made, and kids are able to go from one school system to another. But we need to have a serious discussion about how that works, and we need to make that a fair system for everybody. It's for example, it's really not fair. I'm glad they have it, but it's really not fair for Arundel to send their kid wherever they want to send them because they live in Arundel. And there are several towns like that aren't affiliated with a school system, so you can send your kid wherever you want to send them. Well, we have to give. It's about opportunity. We got to give opportunities to kids. What are your reasons? You got a good reason. We got to make sure that we help you achieve that goal that you have.
Yeah. Are you in favor of beyond that, like the idea of like what is it? Wow, you said the words and I've lost them.
I think the money should follow the child.
Right. Whether that's private schools, homeschooling, or different public schools.
Yeah, I think for Democrats that say, well, if you make over $1 million, you shouldn't get access to those taxpayer dollars. Well, okay, whatever. But right now, sure. the way it is, I mean, I don't think that those people would ask for it anyway. Maybe, I don't know, but I do think that the money should generally follow the child. I do like what they're doing in Arizona, where you set up your own accounts. You can see them online. Your student can go where they want to go, including a religious school. By the way, some of the answer to the problem that we can't not address this. Some of the answer to the problems in schools has to do with faith. This whole idea that the separation of church and state, that's different than the separation of faith and state. Every child should have the opportunity, and I don't see this happening anytime soon, but I certainly do support it. Any child should have the opportunity to have a moment of silence where they can reflect and pray, and then that should be followed up by saluting the flag, and then let's get to work. I know that sounds old-fashioned, but I think we need that in Maine. We need it.
Well, our society. There's nothing wrong with being old-fashioned. Our society was a lot more stable in the old times, and obviously there were problems in those societies as well. But I wouldn't say that we've progressed, even though the progressives would say that we have. In some spaces we have, but overall people are less happy. People are more stressed. There are more issues in our society than in the past, and I'm one of those people. I'm a Christian, and I'm somebody who largely has boundaries. I go to church. I don't talk about for the most part. I don't go there trying to talk about politics or business. I don't go to my business trying to talk about politics or my faith. I don't go to politics to talk about Christianity or my business. But if you're looking for a website, I'd love to help you. But right. As a quick aside, just that's not you, that's to anybody. But there is a reality that doesn't mean that we can't talk about those things in those places. And there's a really great sermon that was preached. I was leading up to the election last year. I was trying to get a little bit of time away from politics. And so I decided to listen to one of my favorite preachers, a guy by the name of Matt Chandler, that some people I think have incorrectly suggested has gone woke. And if you think that, then you need to check yourself. But anyway, he's a preacher out of Dallas, really, really great preacher. And his sermon was his sermon series called Thorns and Thistles, I think. And it was actually about politics and religion. And it was actually about how, one of the comments that I remember him saying is basically why is it that we are the ones that can't engage. That Christians shouldn't get involved in the politics, but everybody else can. Everybody else's worldview is okay, but Christians shouldn't because of separation of church and state. And it leads into this, like, the separation of church and state is a comment that's made in a letter by Thomas Jefferson to a church, basically telling that church that the government can't tell them what they can and can't do within their church. It is not enshrined in the Constitution. Freedom of religion is enshrined in the Constitution. There is nothing that suggests that your faith can't inform you, that you can't get involved in politics and engage in politics and speak from a Christian perspective, or any religious perspective, in government. Like, that idea is idiotic. I know that in I think it was Belfast or somewhere at a school, at city council, they decided that they were not going to allow a church to have a service in town because of separation of church and state. And it's like, you do not understand the comments which you're making. There's this incorrect perception in society of this idea of separation of church and state, and it is inaccurate. And I think when I was running this last time too, I'll move on from this and real quick, but I got together with a guy who I was a business networking partner. I did not intend to talk about politics or religion with him. And instead, all we talked about was politics and religion. And it was actually in this conversation that he was kind of moving in a direction of faith at the moment. He's since come to a perspective of faith, but he was moving in that direction at the time. And he effectively made this comment that was like, yeah, you can't really fix society's problems. And this is what was kind of leading him to faith, is he'd spent his life trying to help people improve their lives and think about how can we fix and help society from a perspective that did not include faith. And he was coming to this conclusion, like, you actually can't fix the problem without God. Alcoholics realize this. That's one of the things that the tenets of helping them get out of bad situations. But without faith, we can't fix these problems. They're too big for us without believing in something bigger that's able to help us and guiding us. And so anyway, I think that's worth mentioning, and that kind of propelled me to be like, okay, I'm not going into politics to talk about religion still. However, like, there is this reality that this problem is bigger than simply legislation. It's bigger than pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. Like, we need divine intervention here.
Yeah. And what I want to portray is I don't ever want to be perceived as telling you need religion, or telling you what kind of religion, or, which denomination. I want to just, when asked, and sometimes on my own, say to people, I'm a Christian, and this is the difference that it's made in my life. And that's one big reason why I feel like it will help society. And so just being emblematic of, like, those kinds of outcomes is that's really my goal. And it sounds like it's your goal too, which is great. Because the opposite is what I often get from the left is, we're going to change the culture because of this, and this reason. And that isn't taking into account religion. And we just went through that with, unfortunately, I think a lot of people that were employed in healthcare professions that really, they didn't want to take the COVID vaccine, and they got fired. And we had several of them, come to the legislature and sit through public hearings and tell us their stories. And, it's the things that have happened that we get to see. I'll never forget, for 6 months, a mother come into the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee and just sit there, and I went to talk to her, and, like, why are you here? Well, some counselor at the school gave my child a breast binder and told them to wear it without my permission. You know what? People of Maine, parents are going to be the final say in the Libby administration. It's so important to state that, Chuck. That right now, the far left is trying to create a school scenario where private conversations are held between kids and counselors. And in some of those cases, not all of them, we got some great counselors out there, but in some of those cases, the parents should have been notified.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. Yeah. So no, I appreciate that, and I think that's absolutely right. Parental rights, and I'm glad that you're on that stance. And I think obviously in situations to kind of like button this up a little bit, and we'll kind of move on because this has been a long podcast. Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah.
But obviously, in cases where children's lives are at risk, that we know of the DHHS conversation where there's some big problems there, we need to hold parents accountable and protect children first. But in like when it comes to like more cultural like social ideology, those things that doesn't have a place, and the parents should be involved in the conversation at the very least. So well, thank you, Jim, for taking the time and for doing this difficult task of being involved in Maine politics, especially being in the minority for a significant portion of your time up there and having to deal with the challenges of a very partisan Democrat legislature, and on top of that, making the decision to run for governor. We definitely need a good, strong, conservative Republican governor to help fix the mess that the Democrats have gotten our state into. So appreciate you doing all of that in the midst of this.
What I'd like to do is just close by saying I invite you not only to come to jimlibbyforgovernor.com, but I want you to look at my bio. I want you to look at my resume and see if I'm qualified for this job. And if you don't think I am, don't vote for me, but at least look at it, and you will see that it's a career of public service. I'm not just coming in retired and I'm looking for retirement income. I have a job. And I'm a very successful college professor. I've worked for several colleges now. I've worked in the private sector as well. I work for GTE. I work for Corning. But I am ready to do this job. And I only ask that you compare and think about, okay, who's been in the trenches, who's actually got a voting record, and who's speaking the truths. And I think what you'll find is that I do the best I can at making sure I speak the truth.
Well, thank you again so much. And you said it was Jim Libby for Maine.com. Is that?
No, just jimlibbyforgovernor.com.
Right.
It's a pretty extensive website. It's a simple website because our staff has created it purposely by ourselves so that we're not spending, hundreds of thousands of dollars on, having fancy people that are, from out of state that are great web designers. That's not what we're doing. We're putting all of the basics, the functions are there, and you'll have all the reading you could possibly want on policy. And there's more going up. So, I'll just leave it at that and just ask people to come by and take a look and see what they think.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jim. And for everybody else, we'll see you back here maybe a little bit later this week, but at the very least next Monday. There might be a Thursday podcast, so you may see me. But we'll be back here in the near future. In the meantime, enjoy the shorts, and also be sure to check out muddywaters.us to get some merch. There's some fun stuff up there, so ensure that you check us out and definitely check out Jim's website. And in light of the reason I keep interviewing all the different gubernatorial candidates is I want you, the people, to be informed so that you can make a decision. So make sure you do your research into all the candidates we have on the right, and figure out which one makes the most sense for you, essentially. So thank you again, Jim, and we'll see you guys all later.
Thank you, Chuck.